Hi, everyone. Mitch from PickDogs.com and SportsChatPlace.com here with the Puck Dogs. Today, we're going to talk about how to win betting on college football. Anything's going to be better than yesterday's show, which I have to say, I've been doing live shows since they had live shows on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live as well. And I have to say, yesterday could be the most boring show we've ever done. It was, for me at least, it was just brutal. I don't watch video games. I don't play video games. So to spend an entire show talking about sim picks, I can't think of anything more painful for me. Maybe we could talk about.
I can.
What's that?
I can. Hockey.
I don't know. We could talk about cleaning the house or something. That might be more exciting than that. But hopefully everyone's having a good time of it. Seems like, we're kind of at that point here in the, wherever you guys are, if you're under lockdown, quarantine. I know for me, I'm at that point where it's like I've been home for so long at this point. It's all just running together, and it's pretty normal to do nothing. And, it's just starting to feel that way. But, we do have the NFL draft coming up. We do have, there is going to be sports. At least there's talk now about, like, how they're going to resume the season. I think, and we're kind of at that point. I know a lot of states, like ours, we're past the 2-week point of when they started the lockdown. So you would think that, just that this would be the worst week for as far as cases go. But what we're seeing in most places is that they're flatlining, and we're all having sports withdrawal. We're not going to sit here and complain about, oh, we're missing sports. We are, it's 100%. It's like we're not going to sit here and complain about it, whine about it, and anything like that. It's just, it is what it is. What we are is we're going to deal with it. We're going to do the best we can with what we have. And we're going to be in the best position that we can be when things resume, which we will be. There are some sports that are going on. We're covering them at Sports Chat Place and Pick Dogs. So you can certainly check those out. Been covering the sim games. Been covering the NBA games on ESPN, the NBA 2K. We'll cover horse if they have it. No, I can't golf. Golf courses are closed down until April 30th here. I have a feeling that here, though, on April 30th, that they are going to reopen. I really do have that feeling. I know a lot of places it gets extended, and things have been extended, but like I said, I think everyone here has been pretty good about, the way that they do it. And, it might be a limited thing. We might have to walk the courses. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to Hawaii, but it's not exactly the flattest terrain in the world. It's, let's just say there's a volcano in the middle of the island here in Maui. And over the years and years and years, the volcano erupted and erupted and erupted. And basically that's how the island is formed. So it's like this. It's exactly how it looks on, a cartoon. So, am I getting a Brady Bucks jersey?
No.
They are nice jerseys, though. I saw them yesterday when they released them.
Yeah, like Chris is.
I'll consider it.
Brady went to Tampa. I have to join the bandwagon. Woo!
No, I'm not going to join the bandwagon. I will always love Tom Brady. So
I know.
So before we start talking about college football, I do want to talk about these new NFL uniforms, which so far I've seen 3 of them. Different colors, different uniforms. The Rams, the Bucks, and the Falcons. They look exactly the same as they did. I can't tell you one difference between these colors and uniforms. You know. But I can't tell you. I mean, these Bucks uniforms, they look exactly the same. The Rams logo, it's like, yeah, it's awful. And, you know, when the Patriots switched logos, people said it was awful, too. I mean, they hated it. They used to call it Elvis. You know, so I don't know if, you know, if they still do or not. But we're going to talk about college football. But the Bucks uniforms look exactly the same, and so do the Falcons, as far as I'm concerned. They look exactly the same. Right? I mean, the Bucks added a gray version. Is that what they're talking about? I mean, I'm missing this. Weren't they red last year?
They were red. Yeah. I mean, these ones are more. These ones are more of a throwback, closer to their Super Bowl jerseys back in 2003, where they had the red, the white, and they had the black. But the numbers don't look as like. I don't know what
So
the word is to
basically, they look
describe
the
it.
same.
They look like a more traditional football jersey instead of having these futuristic looking numbers, and they just look they're just more.
Do people pay
squared
attention
off.
to this, to these futuristic looking numbers?
I don't know.
I don't. I to me, and I watch. I mean, I don't think anyone here is going to call me out and say you don't watch the game, so you don't know, right? I mean, I pretty much watch all the games. I know the players, so I certainly am looking at the numbers, right? When we talk about games, I can name most of the players, and you know, when I'm watching the game, who caught the ball. So I am looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't see any of this stuff that you're talking about. Zero. I wear glasses. I have bifocals. I have everything. You guys know when I watch the games. Put my these are my distance glasses. I have distance glasses. I got bifocals. I got whatever it takes. But I'll tell you what, these uniforms look exactly the same. Why even bother announcing them? Why even bother? They look exactly the same. Anyways,
See the number on the back.
yeah, no idea. The original Bucks jersey is different. That's the creamsicle, the bright orange, and that to me is the original. You know, that is the Bucks. If they're going to go back, you know, a throwback style jersey, that's the Bucks throwback. There's only the two styles: the red, right? The red, and then the creamsicle for the Bucks. There's not like this, you know. Well, they slightly changed the letters. You know, it's like. See, there used to be a patch of a pirate flag over on this shoulder, and they moved it to this shoulder. Sounds like someone wants to sell some jerseys. We actually do have a deal with Fanatics, so maybe we'll start talking about these jerseys on the website. And, you know, if anyone wants to buy one, could help keep us afloat while we continue to make no money whatsoever. Anyways. College football, speaking of making money, college football to me is the sport that when most people talk about my picks and mention my picks to me, it's the sport that they say that I am the best at college football. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think I know as much about college football as most people. But when it comes to betting college football, my results don't always show. To me, it always seems that on college football, I'm more likely to go on a heater than on any other sport, like a consistent run of heaters and string together consistent wins. But, you know, I don't know if I'm the best college football picker out there. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. It's a big statement. I leave the big statements to the other guys, but I know that most people that have bought my premium over the years, they say, I just want your college football picks, you know. So I think it's because we started as a college football site, and like we've talked about in the past, I kind of know my stuff when it comes to college football because that's the sport that I really grew up with, one of the two sports that I really grew up with in the stands, and I understand it, and I know it. I know everyone can see that. But Chris, what's the first thing you look at when you're betting college football?
For me, a lot of the time it's coaching. I mean, there are coaches that I'm kind of keyed in on fading or backing. Like, we talked about it when we were doing our win totals, but our early season projections. I can't stand Jim Harbaugh as much as the next person. So, whenever it's a big game or whenever he's getting a lot of points, I'll usually look to fade him. The same thing goes for certain situations like Tom Herman as an underdog. He's like 13-2-1 in his last 16 games as a dog. So it's like you just find certain guys that you key in, and I think that's how it is with any sport, certain coaches or certain teams. And you kind of gear towards backing them whenever you can in a favorable spot.
So, to me, it's like I think there's certain coaches that when you get into certain point spread levels, that these are guys like Chris Peterson was always when Chris Peterson has been a kind of and always play it out to the final gun type guy, and then you have other guys that kind of like Tom Allen at Indiana, where he seems to be managing the clock from the first second of the game, and it seems to be more important than actual game strategy. Rod, what are you looking at in college football? Like, what's one of the first things you look at?
First thing I look at is the point spread. See what's the points, who's favored by what. That's the way I look at it. Is it a giant number? Because if you get Alabama, sometimes you can find, and then I look for value that way. That's the first thing I look for is give me a point spread number. What's the number on the game? The odds they've set on the game are the very first thing I look at before this is who's playing who. This is how they have the odds set. Usually you can find some value just going through that before you even dug in deeper into it. That's the first thing I do. Go through the cards.
I kind of do the same thing where it's like before I even make a bet, before I do anything, I'll go, especially in college basketball, where there's so many games. I just go through the entire list and I put check marks next to games that at least pop off the page at me and at least gives me a starting point. I'll go back and fill in the other games and go back and go over them as well, especially, as we talk about them and over the course of the week as we talk about them in the Facebook group and stuff. And I have to say, the Facebook group and stuff, I use this as a tool too, and it's like I've said a million times. I don't respond to every post, but I certainly am not an absentee person in the Facebook group either. And, but I read every post. That's for damn sure. And it's like if I hear something or see something in there, hey, man, believe me, I'll investigate it if it sounds interesting enough, whether I'm talking about it or not in the post. And, a lot of times I'll mention it on the show, some of those angles that we hear about in the Facebook group. But yeah, I kind of do the same thing too. I kind of go through and I see if anything just pops off the page at me. Especially when I do that, I'm more looking for the dog, for the value, like what Rod said. I'm looking for the value. Or it's like, you'll see that Alabama line, like you said, where the line might be actually a little bit to the low side because of the respect given to the other team. And usually you're not going to find it with Alabama, but you're going to find it with Clemson more often, By the way,
you look for that value.
By the way, as far as like the start of the college football season and all that stuff, the Notre Dame athletic director, screw you. That's all I gotta say. Well, we don't want to play the season if we can't have fans in the stands. So screw all the fans that can never make it to a game, right? Screw us, man. The ones that pay for those, that watch it on TV. And you get those massive TV dollars and TV rights that you don't have to split with anyone. It's like, screw you, man. It's like, instead of screwing us, it's like out of having any college football because we love the game, screw you. Right? So
yeah.
Who the fuck does that guy think he is? What a piece of dog shit, man. And if the Notre Dame fans are mad at me and they don't want to see football without their band, I don't give a shit. How about that? That was the dumbest comment I've ever heard in my life. So selfish, man. It's like, because he gets the TV rights when other conferences have to split it. Can you imagine like what that would do to a Kansas State program or an Iowa State program to not have that, to not have the TV rights from a season of college football, and the damage that that could do, especially to like the MAC teams and stuff that have like those weekday night games and things where they play? Crazy, man. It's ridiculous. Anyways, one of the other things that I look at is I look at the weather reports, and I know this is like digging a little deeper, and we'll get back into some of the more high level stuff too. But one of the things that I pay attention to is the weather reports, and a lot of times, I'm not necessarily looking for a wet track or snow, like a horse race or something. I'm looking for some heat or some cold weather, because there are certain teams that just aren't going to play well in the cold weather. Certain players from certain parts of the country. It's not like the NFL where a guy can be on Miami where it never snows, right? Or a Southern California team where it never snows. And they could be from, Minnesota. They could have gone to college in Minnesota and been born in Minnesota and play on, on the Dolphins or the Bucks or something, right? Or the Jags. That's not necessarily the case in college. College recruits a lot locally. So, I'm from Miami, and I know this is a fact, is that there's a good amount of players on the roster for teams like Miami and Florida, and not as much Florida State, but Miami, Florida, Central Florida, FIU, FAU, who have never seen snow at all in their whole life. And I was the same way. I never saw snow till I was 15, 16 years old. So I know how cold it is. It's like a lot of people, Rod is probably one of those t-shirt, and, it's above, it's above 20. I can wear a t-shirt outside, right? But it's like, not me, man. It's like, it gets below 70. I got the hoodie on. And it's still to this day, it's like, it's people are like, oh my God, here. I mean, it's like in Chicago, where it was freezing all the time. I never really fit in weather-wise. I mean, I love Chicago, and I love the people, and it's certainly an awesome place, and I love living there and stuff. And certainly everyone welcomed me there. But weather-wise, I never quite fit in, But I had the big jackets, and the big parkas, and people in Chicago, they wear them. It's not like New York where they're worried about messing up their hair. It's like, in Chicago, they wear the parka, and the hat and the whole thing. But in, here in Hawaii, it's like, it gets below 70, it's like, and I got my hoodie on, no one thinks twice about it. It's like, most people have theirs on too. And, so it's oh my God, it's freezing. It's 68 out, it's like, it's just the way that it is. So I think when you see the cold weather players go north, or the warm weather players go north, it's definitely something to watch out for. And I think on the other side of it, even more so, when you see the cold weather players go south, especially when you pass October, you got to watch out for the weather and look for a warm weather report in Miami or in any of the Florida places like that. So, obviously there's dome stadiums and things like that where this all goes out the window. But I can tell you a story about, a story about when the Dolphins played the Saints one year, and they put the Saints in their black uniforms. And this was a good Miami team, a playoff Miami team. And they put the Saints in the black uniforms for a 1 o'clock game in Miami. And the Saints actually outplayed the Dolphins for most of the game. And then finally, it got towards the end of the game, and the Saints players were just passing out on the field. And I mean, they were just, the Saints, they have those black uniforms. And the Raiders have the black uniforms too. But, back then, there was only the Raiders and the Saints that really had those black uniforms. And the Dolphins would always put those teams in the black uniforms when the games were in Miami, especially the 1 o'clock games. And so dark uniforms on the road in the heat. And the Saints were just passing out on the field. And then finally Miami took a safety, and George Roberts, who was the Miami punter at the time, just in the free kick, just punted the ball right into the guy's chest on the Saints and just knocked him over. And the Dolphins recovered, marched down for a touchdown, and won the game. is what eventually happened in that one. So it was just like the Saints players, they were just out. It was like at that point of the game, they just wore them down. So it's like you might see the more jacked a team is on the road, you know, when they're coming from a cold weather spot into a hot weather spot, the more likely that second half bet is also going to be super live on the home team and the warm weather team. We saw a few years ago South Carolina hosted Texas A&M for the opening game of the season, and it was about 100 degrees on that Thursday, that opening Thursday night that they do. It was about 100, and they asked Kevin Sumlin, who was the coach of Texas A&M at the time, what he thought about that 100 degree day, in South Carolina, and he said, "Have you ever been to Texas in the summertime?" He's like, "This is like a cool fall day for us." And they went in there, and it was the Kenny Trill game where he threw for 500 yards on South Carolina and bombed them. But anyways, weather's something I look at. Chris, what else do you look at here?
When I'm betting on games, I tend to and I'll look at the bigger conference games, but I was going to say don't be afraid to bet on the smaller conferences as well, like your MACs, your Mountain West, your Conference USA, because there's plenty of value to be found there. These aren't games that aren't necessarily the most touched on the board, because people will jump to your Alabamas, your Notre Dames, and that's where most of the line movement will be. But some of these lower lines, like I don't know if you're getting like a free field goal with Buffalo at home as a dog or something, I don't know, but that's where some value is going to be, because a lot of these people aren't looking at these lower teams. So I mean, I look for teams like Buffalo, Fresno State, teams that have been pretty good against the number over the last couple of years, and maybe there's value spots with them as well because they're getting overlooked.
So when I'm looking at the small conference teams, and I do the same thing, you try and look at the games that aren't hammered, like the Notre Dame games, right, which always seem to be right on the number. And LSU, right? These are teams that just seem to be on the number all the time. Not this past year for LSU, but in general, that those are the type of teams that seem to land on the number a lot. But when you look at some of the small conference teams, like in the MAC and in the Sun Belt, what I like to do is I like to look up and down the roster, and like I said, I pay attention to the players, the numbers, right, the names. So I am looking at the uniforms, even though to me when they say we changed them drastically, they look exactly the same. But I kind of do a rough count. How many NFL players does this team have, and how many NFL players does this team have? Because it's not like Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Miami, Florida State, Clemson, where you go down the roster and everybody's just going to the NFL, or at least going to be try out as a free agent. When you go to like the MAC and the Sun Belt, it's a handful for each team. So you kind of pick out who those players are, and then you start to go back to what position do they play. Because a linebacker from if you get a Northern Illinois linebacker that can go sideline to sideline and make 20 tackles a game, and he's injured, well, they're not going to be the same team, as they would be. They're not going to have a guy behind him that does the same thing. Not like at Alabama or at Georgia or Texas, where they can wheel them out in All-American, one after another. It's like once in a while those schools sign a guy that for some reason or another wants to play there. And it's kind of like what we talked about in the NFL draft, the guys that kind of fly under the radar because they went to smaller schools, and ESPN did an article about those guys today. Though they counted guys from the MAC as small school guys, which to me doesn't count. Ben Roethlisberger does not fit into the Walter Payton, Jerry Rice category, as far as I'm concerned. Jackson State and Mississippi Valley State and Miami, Ohio. I mean, Miami, Ohio is just head and shoulders seen as a program. But anyways, that's one of the things that I look for as well. In the small conference games, I certainly look at the rosters and the matchups. If you have like a tackle, even an offensive tackle for one of those teams like that, those smaller things, that's an NFL guy, or a defensive lineman who can create some havoc. Those are difference makers in those games. Rod, what else are we looking at here for college football?
And then also like I picked this from me betting hockey. Rivalries, historical rivalries. This team versus this team. Is this a historical rivalry? And then I go look at the numbers from that. Because usually you can get a good bias. Teams will get up. They seem to get up more for a rivalry game than just a regular podunk game.
Yeah, I think that in a lot of these these rivalries, you can throw the record book out. In other ones, you can't throw it out. And it's the way it's just it in the true rivalry games. In the Axe game, in the Miami Florida State game, in the you know in most of these traditional games. I mean, but sometimes there will be runs in these games, like the Ohio State Michigan one right now. That's been going on about the last 10 years. We have Chinese basketball picks at Sports Chat Place. If you want to go to Sports Chat Place, we got articles. So, yes, we do have picks in Chinese basketball at sportschatplace.com. It's on the front page of the site or under NBA picks. Anyways, but this show's about college football. But, anyways, the rivalry games definitely, you could throw it out the window. You could throw the records out the window. Sometimes you can, but certainly a lot of times they, if you're going to catch a good underdog, usually the rivalry game is a good place to do that too. So, a thing that I like to look at is, once sort of like the weather, but is the home field advantage. Certain schools, the home field matters a lot more than others. If you ever watch, the weekday night games on ESPN, Louisiana Lafayette and places like that, while they seem to show up big for the bowl games, their actual home field advantage really isn't that big. And places like UMass, it's not going to be as tough, while other buildings are just extremely tough to win at. And, even some of the great teams, that you consider the best teams out there, when you look at these Alabama losses in recent years, a lot of them were at Tuscaloosa. A lot of them were. The Johnny Manziel game was at Tuscaloosa. It's like, so while Bama, is tough at home, they're certainly not unbeatable at home. And, when you look at who the longest home winning streaks are, and same thing with Ohio State, they usually will have a stumble during the regular season, and that stumble is usually at home. They play, some of these teams play a ridiculous amount of home games. 8, like they'll play 12-game regular season, 8 of them will be at home. And Michigan is like that. They play tons of home games. So, just look at that home field advantage and see just how big of an advantage it is. And in a lot of cases, you'll see it's not as big of an advantage as you think. In some cases, it's lockdown, it's death. It's like you don't want to go there. And then you have other teams that are just great road warriors. Chris, anything else on college football betting?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've learned from working here over time, and as seasons have gone on, pay attention to the rosters from week one to the bowl game, because week one you're going to get teams that are trying to gel, trying to get new guys integrated, and if you see a heavy favorite in week one, sometimes it's a great spot for some value. And even as the season goes on, maybe a star receiver gets suspended for the first half of a game. Or, maybe someone's a game-time decision at the last minute, they're ruled out. So it's just something to make sure that you keep an eye on, or I would say definitely our rosters. And that's something that I've started to really key in on pre-game and maybe a couple days leading up to the game as well.
That's especially important to watch at places where there's been quarterback competition. Too, in the preseason, in the spring practice and stuff. Be interesting to see how it is this year with no spring practice. Rod, any last thing you're looking at here for college football?
For me, it's also even for somebody as a bettor, you don't have to bet every game. You don't have to try to bet every game. For us, we go through through a fan, find a conference you like, and then just stick with that. Focus a lot more stats and stuff on that conference. We do it all, but and then those teams that you like in that conference. You can probably come out a winner a lot more than trying to just pick games all over the board. I find
I'm with you.
You get a smaller sample size. There's how many college football?
In college football, it's one of those things. It's kind of like college basketball. It's like you don't have to bet every game. You know, I'll end this portion of the show on something similar where it's like I am not a believer in the set amount of games per day. You know, never bet more than 3 per day. I hear this all the time. Never bet more than 2 games a day. Never bet more than 3 games a day. Never this. If 20 games fit your formula that day, then 20 games fit your formula. If 1 game fits your formula, then 1 game fits your formula. If 0 games fit your formula, 0 fit. If 60 fit, 60 fit. It is what it is, man. This is a formula. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And you know, there's no saying how many games are going to fit tomorrow. So it's like the people that are like, you know, you can only bet a certain amount of games, a certain amount of days. It's just, it doesn't even make any sense. It's like, yeah, so what I'm going to do is pass on games that I really like so I can bet a game that I like less tomorrow. It doesn't even make any sense thinking about it that way. So I'm with Rod on that one too, 100%. So
crazy.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't even make sense, but you hear it all the time, you know? You hear it all the time.
Yeah,
and I think, you know, if you're listening to other people's picks, like us or anybody else out there, and I know there's a lot of other sites out there, you guys have a lot of choices, and I'm just glad that, you know, that we're always part of it for a lot of you, that, you know, weigh everything, because, you know, it's very possible that I say one thing, Chris says another thing, Rod says something, and some guy on some other site says something else, you know? Look at the source, and, you know, if you are up in the air, you know, about a pick, and it's like, then that's the one that you don't want to bet, you know? If you're swayed by all these different opinions, then that's the one you clearly don't want to bet, you know? I think when we're all in agreement on games, we certainly don't win them all, but those seem to be the ones that usually hit. You know, we've all been waxed on a game together before, but it's like usually when we're in agreement, you know, we're looking at different things, and so it's basically 3 different angles that are hitting on this game. So, Chris, let's get into my favorite portion of the show. What's going on with the picks? I saw there was a lot of games on the schedule today. We have them covered at Sports Chat Place. I think we should start covering them at Pick Dogs too. I'm going to talk to the guys and see if anyone wants to cover them there. But super exciting stuff in the world of simulated Madden football. It's like, we're not playing video games. We're watching and betting on video games. This is all right. And then when people say you have a problem, and we're talking about something like that, maybe I do. So what do you guys talk about on your show? We talk about betting on watching simulated video game matchups of NFL games. We don't have any problem. Go ahead, Chris. This is your segment.
All right. So at 12 o'clock, so about 20 minutes from now,
start
Atlanta at Carolina. Carolina minus 1.5. Over under 60.5.
I'm going to guess Christian McCaffrey is rated about a $6 million in this type of league.
Carolina has 299 overall guys. They have McCaffrey and Luke Kuechly.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that's the way to go. I'm also going to guess Julio Jones is pretty good and Ridley is pretty good for the Falcons. I'm also going to guess that Devonta Freeman is probably pretty effective. What's the total in this game?
60.5.
60.5. I like the over. Rod?
For this game, I did Carolina minus 1.5. McCaffrey to score the first touchdown. McCaffrey to score the first touchdown is plus 350.
Chris?
Yeah, I like Atlanta. Carolina has the more top-heavy talent, but Atlanta's got better depth, so I'll take Atlanta plus
What a
1.5.
guy like Cam Newton, could he get hurt during this game? Does that happen?
I think the injury sliders are low, like they're at like a 10 or something like that, but he's also only like a 79.
Run up and down all day.
Yeah, he's only like a 79 overall in this game, so he's not having that as much of a impact, I don't think. 3 o'clock Eastern, Dallas at Pittsburgh. Dallas -4, over under 57.5.
How has Pittsburgh been playing in these games?
They just waxed Cleveland yesterday, I think 49-14.
And you guys really liked Cleveland in that one.
Yeah.
On 1 day rest, huh?
Yeah. I was about to take that seriously for a second, and I thought about it. I'm like, wait a minute.
All right, I'm going to do lucky penny on every game. So the first game was Carolina and Atlanta. Let's just see how the penny does. So Carolina, Atlanta. Who's the home team in that one?
Carolina.
So it's Carolina -1.5. We'll do the lucky penny flip. So that one we got Carolina. Who's home in this one? Pittsburgh, Dallas.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh's home. We got Pittsburgh. Rod, who do you like?
Dallas sucks.
You sound really convincing there.
No, I don't.
Way to sell the pick.
This game,
How are you not convinced in a simulation game?
I would take Pittsburgh +4.
Right.
I like the over.
Chris?
And also, I would take Connor to score the first touchdown +600.
Yeah, I like the over 57.5. It's high scoring. 7 Eastern. New England at Buffalo. New England -6, over under 55.5.
Well, that's easy.
New England. Who's home?
Buffalo.
New England.
Yeah, I like New England as well.
First half, second half. New England first half, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like betting simulated video game football isn't enough for Rod. He's got to go to the exotics.
You might as well take Sony. You might as well throw Sony Michel in there for +500.
Why not?
Why not? Right? It's not like I'm betting hundreds of dollars. Put a couple bucks. Put $5 in.
And the last one.
Definitely don't bet what you normally bet on sim games.
10 Eastern, Chiefs at Chargers, Kansas City -6, over under 61.5.
I got the Chiefs.
Even Edelman to score a touchdown is +600. Like Edelman to score a touchdown +600? Come on.
I'll take the Chargers plus the points.
I'll take the Chiefs -6. Where is he?
All right. Well, that sounds very exciting. Of course, we got it all covered at Sports Chat Place and Pick Dogs. We'll also have the NBA games covered for tomorrow, which at least are a little bit more exciting. We have a question from Karen here. She wants to know, what's a slider in the sim games? Because I heard Chris mention this term too.
So basically, when you look at the games, if you were doing computer versus computer, or even if you were playing a video game against the computer, there's a bunch of simulated factors that come into the game. So the slider goes from 0 to 100, 0 being obviously none, and 100 being all the way up. You can throw like human passing accuracy. So you can throw it, and no matter what, the guy could be covered by all 11 players on the field. He'll catch that ball. Or you can slide it to 0 for the computer. The computer could be wide open 3 yards away. They won't catch anything. So there's variables that can be changed to how the game wants to be played, or how you want the game to be played if you're playing it.
That sounds like a scam to me.
Yeah.
That sounds like the bookie's like, "Hee, look at this, we move this little slider up. Nobody catches the ball today. That score is going under."
Kind of like the slider
why
was
they
off
don't bet
during
you
that
like savings on
Toronto-Boston NHL game.
Yeah, 13-12.
Well, anyways, we'll have a lot more sports to talk about, a lot more college football as we find out more about the season and what's going to happen. Like I said, if anyone has any contacts over at Notre Dame, tell the athletic director, screw you. We're playing college football with or without you. You don't want to play? No problem. We got 120-something other teams that are more than excited about playing college football without the band. They're in it for the fans, not for you. Anyways, thanks, Puck Dogs, for joining me. See you guys tomorrow. I definitely like today's show a lot better than yesterday's show with the sim bets. Have a great day.